We are missing Esther, but she told me that she was coming.
And everyone else is here except Evan Crevelin, who is excused. Oh, sorry. And everyone else is here except Evelyn Crevelin, who is excused.
Thank you. Approval of last minutes. Everyone approves? Okay, thank you. And treasurer's report.
So the treasury report is, I'm happy to report. It's not on. Treasury report. I'm happy to report that we are not bankrupt.
Yeah. Very difficult to follow this, Mike. Do you have anything you want to say? Okay, bravo to Erwin.
Yes.
Thank you.
You have copies of your agenda?
I'm sorry?
You have a copy of your agenda?
I emailed them to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Ken, do you have anything you want to talk about right now? Okay. And Peggy, we are counting on you to update us.
So happy to be here with all of you today. Just have a couple of things to update the community on. Our COVID status continues to be good. We do have 2 residents currently with COVID, but everybody is really recovering very nicely. No one has been very ill, some minor symptoms, but things that will not cause anybody a hospitalization or death, which is always the best news, thanks to those wonderful vaccines. I have gotten a lot of questions about the new booster that's out there, the 4th COVID vaccine, and we are planning on holding clinics, just like we have in the past, probably middle to end of next week. I don't have a definitive date. I have reached out to our pharmacy just to make sure the process to secure the vaccine is the same as before. So once I get that information, we will get the dates published to all of you. But our clinics have been well attended, and I think everybody's been pleased with how we've managed everybody getting through those. So you don't need to run out and get one, but if you don't want to wait one more week, every local pharmacy, retail store, every place you can imagine is offering the 4th vaccine. But we will be doing it, like I said, the end of next week. The one thing I have added as a new precaution is for those of you that are traveling by plane, train, or bus, we are seeing a little increase in people becoming positive from the travels. So to prevent any spread in the community, what I've asked, it was in Friday's memo, but I'll just reinforce it today. If you travel by means other than car, please let us know when you're back the day you return so we can test you, just to make sure you have arrived back on campus with a negative COVID swab. And then we're going to ask to test you again on day 3 and 5. Most people turn positive by day 5. And to limit the amount of exposure time that you're with others for those first 5 days. If you come back and the first one's negative, we hope the next 2 will be as well, but they could turn positive, usually up till day 5. So I would just ask that you not attend, like large gatherings or dine in our dining venues, just so you don't expose other people, because then you become part of that exposure group where we have to test you day 1, 3, and 5. So again, I don't know, Susie, you want to wait for questions at the end?
No, that's okay. If you can answer questions.
Okay, if anybody has a question about the travel restriction, I'd be happy to answer it.
From America, from Pittsburgh, and from Israel. They've all had 4 shots.
do they have to be tested here?
We will not test them. We've not tested visitors at all from the beginning, so we're not going to start that. But again, I would just question them, making sure that, like you said, they're all fully vaccinated. It's now called up to date if you've had the boosters, and just make sure. I would ask them if they've been recently tested. If they develop any symptoms, though, while they're here with you, please notify community nursing as soon as you can. And then we'll certainly make sure you're tested.
Your travel by bus does not include the Whitney Center bus?
No. I guess Greyhound and those bus lines are still in operation, but like I said, we've just seen a small uptick with people that have traveled, so we're just taking every precaution we possibly can.
Nobody is allowed to travel back by airplane from out of this country without having a negative test. You can't even check in for your flight until you've had an official negative test.
The reason why we're asking, though, to test is you could come back negative and you could have caught COVID in whatever country, state you were in, and then show up positive a day or two later. So we're just going to be real cautious and offer that testing free of charge by the community nurses at any time for any travels, because it can show up later than before you board the airplane or when you get back right away.
Do you recommend, would you just generally recommend that we ourselves, if we are traveling, wear masks?
Well, I know most of the...
You can't tell us to,
Yeah.
but...
Most of the
Make it
modes
so-
of transportation, like airplanes, et cetera, they do require masking. Again, given your
Yeah, I know.
age and your, immunocompromised conditions, I would recommend it.
All right. Number two, because so many of us have changed in appearance over the past year and a half, may not always recognize somebody or by name or this or that. Is it really against our code of letting people know, yet yes, Bitsy Clark is down with COVID, she's doing fine. At least people would call her, Betsy, how are you, and keep in touch. Is that really verboten here to do? Does the rest of your staff, our staff, know who has it? Does everybody on staff know that?
The healthcare staff, no. We try to minimize, that's private information, and it's against HIPAA policy to share that with people that don't need to know. So our healthcare staff definitely know. We do let the other departments know that there's monitoring in apartments, just so when they go in, they're prepared, like the housekeepers, dining, but we don't actually confirm whether it's an exposure or a positive COVID. But they're on notice that that particular apartment is under community nursing monitoring.
Okay.
And we're not allowed to share that, as you know, with HIPAA. Now, if you want to let
Okay,
your
that's-
neighbors
that's-
know, that's up
what
to
I'm
you.
asking. That's what I'm asking. Okay, thank you.
The next item, I'm very happy to announce that we have been able to secure Janice Howard as our new audiologist. Many of you know her. She was with Hearing, Speech, and Balance for many years with Dr. Bachman. I actually met with her last week. Yeah, I did sneak in for a little bit of a meeting to just make sure that this was a good fit for her and us. I'm thrilled. I know her well. She's been here many times. She's helped us with projects over the years, such as the Hearing Loop in Center Stage and in here. So she's well known to our community. She is thrilled to be able to service the residents of Whitney Center. And she's an audiologist, which is great because all we had was a hearing aid specialist. So this is actually a much more elevated position for her. It looks like Monday, April 18th, which is a week from today, will be her first day. But we'll send out more details. We're just confirming that. She had to cancel today last minute, and I apologize. We tried to get the word out. She was going to do a presentation on communication skills. It was scheduled for today. On Friday, she sent me an email saying something had developed that she couldn't make it. But she's still going to do that presentation, so you'll all get a chance to meet her as well. Deb?
Is she actually going to be, is the presentation going to be the 18th?
No, I think the presentation has to be rescheduled. I don't have that date yet. I should have it within a day or two. But her first clinic day, where she'll be in the wellness center, is Monday. And we'll put that in the newsletter so you know what time.
My question is, how do we make an appointment with her?
You're going to call her office, so we're going to put her phone number. So just like a lot of the other specialties here at Whitney Center, you call the office of the specialist and make the appointment directly with them in their office, and then she'll have the schedule with her. And then the last topic I was asked to investigate, some of you have reported to the resident council that they've noticed some private aides not upholding the standards of Whitney Center. So I did some investigation with the help of the resident council, who made me alert to this situation. And I have written a letter to all the private partners that we have for the private aides. And I was pretty firm telling them, because they work within our campus, even though they're not employees of ours, we do hold them to the same standards. Some of the things that were reported is some of them are gathering together in the living room, kind of slouched down in the chair on their cell phones. It's not a very good look. It's not what we would allow staff to do. So I have asked them to educate all of their private aides. And I did get a response from 3 of the 4 agencies assuring me they would definitely address it with their team members that are here at Whitney Center. So just give it a little time, make sure everybody gets that education from the partners, and if you notice it again, you can let me know, Michelle Stocking know, who's in charge of community nursing, and we will continue to address it, because we want the same standard for our outside partners as we have for our own team members. So it was a pretty firm, I did share the letter with Susie, so I think she'll agree it was pretty firm that, you know, we appreciate their service to our residents, but they need to live up to our standards.
It was firm and nice.
Phyllis?
You still look relaxed.
I am. I am. I had Mike was very generous. I had asked for 2 weeks off because it's been a long 2 years for me, and Mike, being the supervisor that he is to me, offered me to take 4 weeks. So I was gone for a whole month. I've never been on vacation for a month in my entire career, which has been very long. And I had such a relaxing time, was able to spend time with family and friends, and I bought a new house and I sold my current house. So I was really busy, but it was all relaxing, stress-free things. So I'm ready to come back and get going again with all of you. I missed all of you very much.
Well, we
Whitney Center
missed
is a
you
big
as
part.
well. We missed you as well.
Whitney Center is a big part of my life. Carol?
I assume when we're talking about the living room, this is primarily when pub hours. So, well, everybody knows, if they've seen me, I certainly have an aide. And sometimes she, will sit at the table with me. That doesn't mean that others would like to join us that way. But if she wants to wait, what do they do if they know they have a client, or, I call it a client, it's a patient, it's the world I come from. But anyway, in the pub, and they're visiting with friends, where do they wait? What have we provided for them so that they can be close to their, their charges and still not look like they're doing,
Yeah, that's a great question, because, there isn't a lot of places they can sit and still see their resident or their customer. So what we're asking is they still should be in somewhat of an eye view of their resident, but they shouldn't all congregate together, slouch down in the chair, be on their cell phone. They can still sit there and look professional, and I would rather that they walk back and forth checking in and not just maybe sit there for an hour in a big congregate setting.
So you've given them those guidelines
Yes.
on how to
Yes.
respond? Okay,
Yes.
thank you very much.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peggy. Is there any questions from the committee at this time, or should we wait until we have more items?
Let's wait.
Okay. Ken or Mike, do we have an update on the light, the traffic light?
Yes, so the traffic light on the corner of Dixwell and Treadwell will be on tonight's Hamden Traffic Authority agenda, and I will be representing that case or speaking on that case, making a request that that the town add a left turn signal at a minimum there. Or at least investigate what the best alternatives are. I don't want to presume to know I'm not a traffic engineer, so. But I will cite the fact that over the past 5 years, less than 5 years actually, there have been over 40 incidents at that light, and we have documentation on that. So I'm not going to get into the emotional aspect of Caitlin's accident. While I believe that's relevant, I think sticking to facts and the severity of those 40-plus incidents at that intersection should be sufficient to make the case. But I will be doing that on the agenda tonight. So we'll see what happens after that.
Thank you, Mike. I don't know how often everyone here checks their email and their computers, but I hope that you have all seen the updated version of the Residence Guide. I want to say congratulations to your team, Ken, because that is an excellent, excellent document, and every possible questions that a current resident or a new resident might have is addressed in this guide. And thank you, I assume, Raphael, for making it searchable. So you no longer have to flip through so many pages before you get to the item that you're interested in. Great job. Thank you for that.
Can I just say a word on that?
Sure, of course.
I spoke with Janet, so on the resident guide. Janet's the one that actually sent that out to everybody last week. There's a hard copy in the library, and we're also going to have, Janet's going to put a message out on Channel 102, so if residents want a hard copy, to request it through Janet. And if you see anything that you're unsure of as you're reading the guide, just filter everything through Janet, and she can be that gatekeeper. And I will tell you that it was a complete team effort here with all the departments weighing in. It was a long time coming because of COVID. We were trying to get the latest and greatest before we could get out our policies and our practices. So I appreciate the patience here, and this should answer a lot of the questions. It will also go to all new residents coming in as well, working with the liaisons on that. So this information will continue to get out, and then we'll certainly update it as needed, as appropriate.
Thank you. Phyllis, would you mind talking to us about the Mother's Day brunch that you are working on?
No, we have a total of 50 people that have been invited. We have a total of 50 people who have been invited, 12 of whom are the Residents' Council, because they are the hosts for the brunch. I've received very few acceptances and 2 refusals. But I would ask everyone who is new or member of our Residents' Council to please let me know so that I can keep my list up to date. And also, very honestly, to save me from making a lot of phone calls. Are there any questions about that? It's only for the residents that are new, and new is 6 months.
Any question for Phyllis? It will be a spectacular event. If and because Phyllis has already had the experience of doing lunches and brunches, I know it's going to be really a lovely, lovely time. Okay. I'm going to turn to Erwin again, as I do many, many times. Erwin, can you talk to us about explaining the residency contract?
Okay. So when you all came here, you signed a contract, and there were 3 different contracts. There's a life care, a modified, and an unbundled one. And that contract specified what type of health benefits you would get. I have the modified that I never understood. Because I did not understand it, I thought there might be some other people who didn't understand it either. And it turns out that 10% of us have modified, 15% are unbundled, and everyone else has the total life care. So I thought I would start some research to figure this out and then disseminate it. Fortunately, I got stopped very early by Mike Rambrose, who said to me, I think Michelle Pandolfi is doing that. So I went to see Michelle Pandolfi, and sure enough, she had done this. She had actually has made 3 brochures, one for each of the different contracts that you have, that really does explain very well what your actual health benefits are. And so the way this is going to work is I'll send a memo out to everybody telling them that if they will contact their liaison person, that individual will find out what kind of a contract you have, and then will get you the proper brochure that explains your health benefits. And then if that is not sufficient, the liaison person understands the health benefits and will explain them to you. And I think that with that, everyone will really have a clear understanding of what this is all about, rather than trying to figure out yourself and running around. So it's wonderful that Mike had asked Michelle Pandolfi to do this, and she had done this, and he had told me, so I didn't have to go through this whole thing because I had trouble figuring it out. And so it's all settled. Contact your liaison person, and it'll be all clear as crystal.
How do we get a copy of the brochures? How do we get a copy of the brochures?
Oh, so the individual will talk to their liaison, and the liaison will get the brochure for them, because the liaison will get you the proper brochure, because you don't have to try to figure out the other 2 contracts, because it doesn't. So the liaison is going to be the point person who actually is going to be able to explain this. And I know that the liaison people are going to be happy to do this because they're the ones who suggested to me that that was the best way to get it done. So you're all set, folks.
Thank you, Erwin, very much. Let's turn to the committee and find out if they have any questions right now that we should be addressing that are not on the agenda.
Are you talking to me?
I'm talking to the committee. If that applies to you, please pick up the microphone.
For quite a while, 9 months or so, Residents' Council has been looking into reactivating our internal, or I call it infernal, transportation system. We, in the early stage of the pandemic, we lost use of the trolleys, and I understand that there is many residents are looking forward to having it reinstated. So the Residents' Council established this special committee who have been looking at various alternatives, and as a matter of fact, even had a trolley or cart brought to the resident a few weeks ago, tried it out, and decided it was not appropriate. One thing else that should be noted, when this matter was discussed with management, we were told that the drivers of the trolleys would have to come from within volunteers of the residents, that management was not about to provide such service. I understand there was a meeting Friday with both Lynn and Susie regarding this matter with you, Michael, and I'd like to have you advise us where things stand. A suggestion was made to reactivate the old trolleys, or if they were not serviceable, to go out to the manufacturer, have them rebuilt, or buy new ones just like the old ones. One of the concerns that Ken expressed to us was that anybody mounting the rear seat of the old trolleys had it, if they were a little overweight, like one of our residents who since passed away, tipped the front wheels, we might tell anybody riding the back to be under 15 pounds. So I welcome your comments, sir.
I'm going to ask Ken to report, because Ken's the staff person that's heading this up and working with the resident committee. But let me say this. Yeah, the weight limit on the back is 150 pounds. Okay? It's 150 pounds. Unless the driver acts as a ballast to counteract anyone over 150 pounds, the thing will tip. It'll tip back. It's unsafe. Frankly, let me just say that the trolleys that we had are no longer serviceable. We cannot use those things. So let me just disabuse any notion of reinstating those trolleys. That can't happen, because from the manufacturer's specifications don't allow for us to use it in the way that we intend to use it. That said, I'm going to have Ken update us on what progress we have made.
Thanks, Mike. I think I will update on some progress, because we have actually made some progress as recently as Friday late in the afternoon. So I'll update this group on that. But I do think from a context perspective, it's important to go back and explain a couple of things. Even though we said those trolleys cannot go back into the service, they're not the right things for this community, they are a safety concern. A lot of residents don't remember here, because you haven't been here when we first put them into play over 10 years ago, that these were put into play to be run by resident volunteers only. I mean, we never had staff assigned to these trolleys when we first brought these here. Mary Martino, I think she was here. She was the one that put signs up to see what residents want to volunteer. We did some training. It was purely for the residents to drive other residents. That was it. But what happened over the course of time, the demand from the residents to our staff people who couldn't say no, it kept on going and going and going. So that, just to put it into context, it was never contemplated that staff would run these programs. Fast forward, I have been working very closely with an ad hoc group of residents to take a look at what type of internal transportation system could we use in this community. And we have had a couple of trials, and what we've realized, we've come to the conclusion, was that the golf carts, the items that are available, are not suitable for this community. It's very challenging to find the right internal vehicle for a community like ours. In fact, for many communities, residents keep on asking me, there's got to be other communities out there that have something that run internally. And time again, I've said, myself and Mike Rambrose, we know well over 100 organizations, and we've spoken to these organizations. Nobody has an internal transportation system. This is what typically happens in the communities. I've personally seen it, and Mike has personally seen it. Most residents, if they can, they'll get an individual scooter. Other residents, will be transported by a wheelchair. That's typically what happens. So I'll fast forward to the meeting we had on Wednesday with our internal transportation committee, and we talked about this. We talked about what are some of the options. We know we can't do a golf cart. We know the trolley system, the old one, does not work for our community. We've looked around. We haven't really seen anything. So there were a couple things that we spoke about. One was we could use transport using a manual wheelchair. We could get back to that. But what a lot of the residents were saying was, on our ad hoc committee was, something, our residents for some reason do not want to be seen being pushed in a wheelchair. There was some stigma around that. So our committee, our resident ad hoc committee, talked about, is there something that we can kind of unearth there? Is there a program? Is there something there that we can do some education and training around? So I will tell you, Robert actually is going to be working with the liaisons and our social worker to get a little bit more information on we know there's a stigma behind it, but can we unearth that a little bit more? So that's number one, one thing that we're looking at. But the second thing that we're looking at, actually, and it was a trial that we saw, Mike, myself, and Raphael actually had a meeting late Friday with this company that's out of Japan, is they've actually developed an autonomous wheelchair. And we're actually talking to them about possibly trialing it here, something that just goes on its own. We're in communications with them right now. We're hoping we have to just sign some documents, but we're hoping to get an autonomous wheelchair here at Whitney Center, so the resident does not need to be pushed; they can control it themselves. So that's where we're at right now. That's where we're at right now. We understand that there are some residents that have difficulties moving around this community, so we're continuing to try to find what we can do for this community and what the community can do with each other. So that's the latest and greatest. And I'm willing to take questions.
I have one.
Sure.
I did just watch the link to the YouTube video. It is a cool little vehicle. What's the cost?
We know something. We don't want to go with the cost yet right now. Let's just see if it works for this. What's that? Okay.
I have no problem talking about the cost. So the vehicle, and Ken, you sent that link out to the Residents Council, right?
Well, I sent it to the...
Oh, to the ad hoc committee, okay. And then we can make it more widely available after we take a harder look at it. So it's essentially a subscription. It's a service. And to subscribe for the service is anywhere between $2,800 to $3,600 or thereabouts a month. Yeah, per vehicle. Okay? But when we do the math, and if we were to have, sort of, I don't know, what do we say, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. or 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day, 7 days a week, we calculated the hours and we backed into the cost of staff if we had staff doing it, plus the vehicle. So it's an investment for sure, but we think it might be a worthwhile investment. We just have to look at how we're going to pay for it. So if we can, it's certainly justified if this solution works for us, and that's what we're setting up as the trial. So in order to do this, the company needs to come on site. They need to it uses LiDAR technology, which is laser focused radar, and they need to map the building. And then once they map that, they plug that into the software, they program that into the computer system, and now the vehicle can operate autonomously. I believe it's a 2-week trial period that Ken and Raphael are trying to set up. And once they do that, then we can see if it works for us. If it does, then we got to figure out, okay, how are we going to pay for it?
So at most, we would need 2 vehicles. We could probably do with 1 if people scheduled,
Yeah.
you know,
Yep.
I need to get to PT at this time and
Right, right.
so forth.
So the vehicles, to be clear, they're autonomous in that they'll be parked at a spot. So let's think about 2 vehicles parked at a spot. A resident will come down. I don't know if there's a scheduling component to it, maybe. That vehicle will take the resident to the location, to the destination, and then will return on its own to the spot where it needs to go to park. The only interface from a staff standpoint is regular interface is batteries. So it runs on a battery, and if you change out the battery every 6 hours or so, I think it is, it runs continuously. So we would have 2 batteries per unit. And then the rest of it is on a service, so all the maintenance and so on. Floyd?
You're making the assumption that people who need such a device are going to be able to operate safe.
Microphone.
Pardon?
Microphone.
Oh, excuse me. The assumption is that people who would need such a vehicle are able to operate sane.
Well, there is no operation involved by the passenger. What the passenger has to be able to do is if they have a device, like a walker or a cane, they'd have to be able to put that onto the back of the vehicle, which we have to test out, right? We don't know how that's going to work. And then they have to be able to sit backwards onto the seat, and then the arms come up, and then it goes on its own. And then when they don't have to steer it, it's autonomous, Floyd. It's autonomous. It is using technology to steer and drive itself. And it has sensors so that if people walk in front of it, it'll slow down, it'll stop, it'll actually enunciate a message to please move out of the way, and then it won't go. So it works very much like a self-driving vehicle, like a car.
How about the speed limits?
It's 1.5 miles an hour is what they've governed it to. There was just a fortuitous thing that Raphael found and had us sit in after our conversation on Friday. So not to sort of go too far into this, the next step is to set up a test run with the company, get it out here, and then we can think about cost, how we cover it.
So an individual from the South Building gets to the, excuse me. An individual from the South Building gets up to the bistro, disembarks. What happens to that chair? Somebody else back at the South Building needs transportation.
Yeah, so I'm going to say it again. The chair autonomously returns to the designated spot at the south desk by itself.
There's a limit, so after 2 minutes, once the person's there, after 2
Yeah.
minutes, he'll come back.
So I'll repeat that for Ken. So after someone gets off of the vehicle, the chair, it waits 2 minutes to ensure that they're not getting back on, and then it'll turn around and head back.
And will you consider the outright purchase rather than renting?
Oh, gosh, we would never purchase something like that. I'll tell you right now, we couldn't keep up with the technology, much less the maintenance. We don't want to own that. We want to lease it or rent it, whatever service package they offer, because that ensures all upgrades into technology and maintenance. That's not something from a business standpoint, doesn't make sense to own something like that.
Thank you.
It sounds very futuristic, but the future is here.
Yes, so let me say, I find this very intriguing. We'd be the first aging services organization in the United States to have one of these vehicles. So for that reason, we might get a discount, right? If they can break into the market, and we have some connections with other organizations, so maybe we could sell ourselves a little bit and get a break on the price.
Yes.
Do you envision having the station, the plug-in station, near where somebody who really needed assistance putting up their, their chair or their wheelchair or their, well, whatever, not the chair, but their, and loading themselves, would there be somebody near there? Would you be putting it near where they could get some assistance from a staff member if needed?
Mrs. Greenbaum, that's a really good question. When we bring the vehicle on site, there's a good chance it will be near the reception desk in that area. So it's not plugged in, it's just batteries. So you would just have to replace the battery. So it doesn't need to be, it's not being plugged in.
Yeah, I understand that.
No, we'll have to charge the batteries and then we replace out the batteries. So it comes with 2 batteries. And so that will be on us to make sure that we replace out the batteries appropriately, but the vehicle itself does not need to be plugged in. And yes, so these are things that we do need to evaluate, helping on and helping off. I mean, community, Peggy and her team will be part of this as well, or rehab, because we need to validate who can get on, who can get off by themselves, who needs assistance. There's a lot of work behind what we need to do here. So, but that's why we're going to be trialing this. We're going to be, and not only once we trial it, there'll be a survey done. So they're going to be on site actually for a week. The company is going to send a couple of people on site to run it for the first week, and then we run it the second week. And there'll be forms to fill out so we can get an evaluation.
The self-driving aspects of it frighten me, because we're all aware of what's happening in the outside world. It's very different, clearly, from self-driving cars and self-driving trucks. Despite that, even in this community, with people the age that we are, accidents are bound to happen, and it bothers me no end. How can you predict in advance somebody's walking and suddenly stumbles and falls, and this self-driving vehicle doesn't sense that? Things like this are bound to happen. It troubles me.
So that's what through the trial period you'll see, but they showed it to us. It's actually pretty interesting. Originally, they had the vehicle going 3 miles an hour, and what they realized is that was a little bit too fast, because if somebody did come in front of it, it would stop and the person would be jolted forward. So at 1.5 miles, it's going pretty slow. The sensors are there, and you can take a look at it when the vehicle comes here. You'll take a look at it, and we'll do some trials around that.
I'm still troubled.
We can simulate though. We can simulate that. Mike will be the first one to test that out by stumbling in front of it.
Run over me.
Ken, where is this vehicle used currently?
So it's overseas in Japan. So it's airports actually. So in the United States, actually, there are some airports that are using it currently right now. And in overseas in Japan, it's hospitals and healthcare centers. They're trying to break into the United States into the senior living, assisted living field. And so that's why they're very interested in us trialing it for them.
Any other questions on this? From anyone?
When are they coming?
Raf and I are working on that, probably sometime in next month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next month, end of month.
Yeah. We just coordinate everything.
Congratulations for keeping on trying to find answers. I really must say that the ad hoc committee looking into the transportation, internal transportation, has worked at this for 9 months, as Floyd said, and we really have tried to think about everything except something like this. So we wish everybody good luck with this. Thank you. Yes, there's questions.
If that subject is been discussed, I'd like to go back to something that Erwin said about hiring somebody to go to the hospital when somebody from Whitney Center has to go to the hospital. First of all, do we know how often this occurs? This all came out, I assume, from one individual who had planned to commit suicide, went to the hospital, was not treated appropriately for his suicidal plans, and then was sent home, and then went to a second place where he was treated even worse, and came home and then committed suicide as he had planned. How many of Whitney Center people go to the hospital a year, and for what purpose? Somebody who goes for a laceration and is sewed up doesn't need a physician or a nurse to go with them. And I wonder, before we go and spend $300,000, whether we should investigate what the problem is, how often it occurs, and whether there's some easier solution.
Thank you, Dr. Fisher. I love your way of thinking. We need to have data. We need to be intelligent about these decisions that we might make about installing such services, especially at that kind of cost, right? And so it behooves us to understand what the demand for the service is so that we know what the appropriate response is. That said, however, I'm looking at that issue more broadly in terms of volunteer, a organized volunteer coordination at Whitney Center. Right now, our residents volunteer tons of hours. I don't know, 100,000 hours. I have no idea what it might be. You all volunteer for committees, you volunteer for events and things like that. And what I aim to do, one of my stated objectives for this year under our workforce goal, is to find a way to fund a volunteer coordinator. This is a paid position to build on the wonderful culture of volunteerism that we already have in the community by organizing, by identifying additional opportunities for volunteerism and organizing folks from outside of Whitney Center, as well as internally, to volunteer for those opportunities. One such opportunity is a hospital companion program, which we have to sort of flesh out. What does that mean? You know, what criteria might we use, and so on and so forth. So while we will gather the intelligence around that particular issue, our solution is much more broad-based, and we'll be able to apply that in a meaningful way. But the workforce behind this is, it's not to hire specific people to simply wait for a hospital run, but rather to engage a organized volunteer corps in a way that can be deployed for this kind of need.
I think we need some information about how many patients from residents from Whitney Center go to the hospital by ambulance, what the problem is, and therefore what the need is, whether you need a registered nurse or a physician or somebody with a medical background to go.
Certainly, regardless of however we decide to provide such a service, it'll never cross that line into the medical realm. So we're not going to provide that kind of, we are not licensed to do that, nor do I want to take on the risk or liability to take that role on. So we have to be very careful to the extent that we'll provide. This is about advocacy. This is about giving a voice to folks who may not have one because they're alone. They're not in a position to advocate for themselves. So we want to make sure that we're filling that gap, not a medical one. So, but as I said, you can ask any of my team members. I'm very much data driven when it comes to making investments of this sort, and we will be that way to make sure we understand exactly what the demand is and what the scope of coverage might need to be so that we can appropriately fill the gap.
Just as long as we know what the problem is, because we don't
Right.
really know. We don't know how many people go
Right.
to the hospital, and we don't know what they go for.
Right.
Thank you.
I'd like to just put in a comment as someone who had a lot of experience going with someone to the emergency room leading up to living here. What someone needs in the emergency room is someone to stand outside the door waving their arms frantically to get attention, or get water, or get a pillow. I mean, you get a little desperate in the emergency room, and if you're alone, I can't even imagine being alone in the emergency room.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah, yeah.
Are there questions not only on the topics that we discussed today, but on any subject at all? Phyllis? I think Phyllis needs a mic.
A couple of people approached me with this question. They have trouble bending down. Excuse me. And the mail reports that they get, or the memos that are put under their door, which are important, they have trouble getting. Is there any way we could identify those folks and put it maybe in the doorknob or something? Can we?
I know that some of the residents have little tables outside their doors, so that's very helpful for us to place a memo. Right now, we are electronically sending most information out electronically. So for those other people that want a hard copy, we're leaving them in the mail room as well. So I think it's a great idea to figure out who those people are that are really having trouble getting it from the floor, because the last thing we want is to have you go to the floor to get it and slip. So I'll work with the liaisons to try to figure that out in the next week or two.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Could we have a detachable device on the door fronts of those people who have problem? We can just clip it on the memo. They may, just sticking on there with a magnet or whatever, some device on the front of the door, and that way you can just clip it on the outside. When they open the door, they pull it down, and that should take care of it, unless it's going to deface the door.
If I recall, so the south building all have the purse shelves, right? So we're talking about the north building for people. If I'm looking for maintenance, so yeah, Mary.
In the past, they gave up this little canvas.
Have a solution.
So in the past, when we were delivering mail, we would ask the residents to put out the little small canvas bags on their doorknobs in the north building, and they were inserting memos and mail through that. So we'll work with Peggy and get a list of residents that need assistance in that way.
If I'm not mistaken, the door jambs are also metal, they're steel. And so we may be able to use a magnet for the door jamb, but it wouldn't be on the face, the outside face, it would be on the inside of the jamb. Maybe that's a possibility, but we'll take a look at what the best solution is. But I think we don't want to do it wholesale, right? It's really for identifying, having ongoing knowledge of who those residents are that are having difficulty, and we'll find the right solution to put in place.
Any other? Yes, Joe?
Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Joe Blumberg, and along with Nancy Rosenbaum, I co-chair the Conservation and Nature Committee. And I want you to be aware of two major projects that we are talking about that could possibly have tremendous effect on this organization for many years to come. One is the possibility of converting to solar energy. As I've said to some of you personally, the assets of the earth are not infinite. They're definitely finite. And the world is doing its best to use up the assets of the earth. And my personal feeling is that we have got to do whatever we can
to get away from fossil fuel and move to other forms of energy, wind and solar. Virtually every week, if you read the New York Times and sometimes even the New Haven Register, God forbid, there are articles in it about various countries or cities or communities that are converting to solar or to wind. I know that Whitney Center investigated this possibility of going solar 5-6 years ago, at which time they were told there would be a 20-year payback of the investment. I think that today there has been a sufficient amount of progress in solar energy that I believe we could do it with a faster payoff. We are encouraging management to do whatever is necessary to investigate this. The second thing with which we have recently become involved, and which will have also have a long-term effect here, has to do with the Olin powder farm, which, as you all know, is behind our buildings. Olin has not used this 102 acres of land for many, many years. I assume it's costing them money, and they are interested in having the town of Hamden either take it over either by selling it to the town, giving it to the town, standing on their head and spitting it to the town, whatever they have to do. The town has asked Whitney Center to get involved in it because of the fact that we are the largest, certainly the largest residential community that borders on to the powder farm. And our committee has been asked to work along with that, and we will be doing so, and I look forward in the future to reporting what goes on there. And I would also be interested if people have any particular things that they either want to or don't want to see as far as this land is concerned, notifying either Nancy or myself or other members of our committee. Lastly, no, not lastly, I can go on for a while. As far as the nature is concerned, this morning I was up on the 6th floor for a different meeting, and Flo McBride pointed out they were standing out on an aisle or out on one of the porches, and she was noticing a bald eagle chasing an osprey up above our properties or above the powder farm, and this is a great area. There was one other thing that I wanted to talk about. Oh, yes. This is also be a long-range idea. As we probably all heard last week, the government came out and said that I believe it's in 2026 that they want all new car fleets to average 46 miles an hour, 46 miles per gallon. I know that at the current time, Whitney Center has a couple of charging stations, I guess, in the garage. And I think the time is going to have to come, and this will obviously be over many years, when they will need additional charging spaces into the garage. And it's something that management is going to have to consider and look into for future years. Thank you.
I would just like to add something to Joe's Blumberg's report to you, namely that Phyllis and I are co-chairs of the Government Liaison Committee, and so we're representing Whitney Center, or help Whitney Center establish a relationship with the local legislative people as well as the state people. And one of the things on our agenda is to help with the development of the Powder Farm. So tomorrow, for example, Phyllis and I will be meeting with the Nature and Conservation Committee to discuss how Whitney Center's community can present some sort of a united front to the legislatures, or to the mayor, or whoever is going to be responsible of our support for the development of the Powder Farm. And the fact is that there was a plan that was made a number of years ago by 4 graduate students from Yale University, from the School of Forestry, on how to develop the Powder Farm. And that report, plus the map, which is vital to that development, was made available by Greg Seaman, found it online and distributed to some of us. And so that information can be used to educate the rest of us as to what was proposed so that we can develop our own consensus about supporting this or not supporting this. And I think once the membership here, the community here realizes what the potential is, I think they'll realize that this is a big advantage, not just to us, but to the town of Hamden. So we're going to be working with the Nature and Conservation Committee to develop a plan to help bolster the development of the Powder Farm behind us.
I'd like to ask Joe, does the Conservation Committee plan on doing any further research regarding solar? Or are you throwing it over into management's lap?
I would hope that our committee will be able to follow through and come up with viable solutions to hand over to management. One of the things that I was thinking about, read about recently is, I'm sure you've seen advertisements saying that if you are a homeowner, that there are certain programs that the state of Connecticut has to encourage you to go solar. Obviously, although we buy our way in here, we don't own anything. But we have 300 residents in here. And in my thought, it would be a wonderful thing to be able to say, hey, state of Connecticut, we've got 300 residents here who could be helped greatly financially by getting solar energy to run this facility or to run a major part of the facility. And I would hope that, I don't know how the hell we'll do it, but I hope that there is some way that we can get the state to help us proceed in this type of a program. Is that what you wanted, Floyd? Okay? Okay.
So if I may, Susie, so first on the solar piece, Mr. Blumberg, you're absolutely right that about, I think it was 5 years ago now that we had an analysis done, and the payback period actually was 28 years, sorry, because of the cost of the, I made some notes here, because of the cost of the panels, the reserve that we had to put into place for the roof repair if we needed to get up there for the panels and so on. We had a photometric study done, and it determined that there was not enough exposure on the north building because of the shadow caused by the south building. So that was part of the study that, Floyd, I see your smirk, I get it. I can show you the report,
I took
okay?
a photograph on the shortest day of the year.
Okay.
And the north building had 97% sun on
Okay.
its roof.
Okay, I'm glad you did that because maybe the engineers we hired didn't know what they were doing. But let's go back and look at it. Okay, great. So what I aim to do like I said I would do several months ago, I'm resurrecting that study. I have asked Mark Brown to give me the contact information at Colliers, which is the engineering firm that we had do the study and do the estimates for us, and update us on any costs information that would help us understand what the payback might be now. The panels themselves back then were 17-year panels. That was a life expectancy before they would have to be replaced. So maybe the technology's improved, maybe there's longer life, maybe the payback now can be shorter, where it would be worthwhile to go forward. As far as the cost of these things, one of the challenges we have is we are not a typical resident, right? We're a not-for-profit business. We don't pay federal income tax or any income tax, right? We pay sales tax, we pay property tax. Because of that, we don't by the letter, we don't qualify for some of the programs, for the tax incentives and the other programs, right? So one of the things we might be able to do is band together with our residents to appeal to the state powers to maybe do a carve-out for communities like ours with larger resident populations and the square footage that we have, so that we could maybe qualify for some of those programs, which we don't currently. That would be a great combined effort if we could push the envelope on that front. That would enable us to make it more feasible to implement a solution. That's if we stuck to the roofs of the two buildings that we have now. The other option that we didn't explore because of the sheer upfront costs was the idea of putting carports over the top deck of the garage. If we did that, then we can create the surface that we would need for substantial solar panel installation, and it would have pretty much sunlight almost all day. So that was another option, but the cost of that was pretty formidable. All that said, I promised you that I would resurrect the study and look into it, update the information, and I want to share that with the committee once we get it all together, and we can figure out as partners how to move forward on this. To be completely transparent with you, this is not going to be, at least this year, the top priority for us. We have some significant goals that I've got the management team focused on, not the least of which is workforce. Our team member experience, our inability to recruit registered nurses amongst other hospitality type staff, along with the rest of the world. And we've got to make some major investments in resources to correct that issue if we're going to do anything well over the near term. In addition to that, we have some major technology goals in front of us to transition our entire cost accounting system, as well as our entire electronic medical record system, and 4 to 6 other ancillary software applications that are attached to those. We've got to get all of that done this year so we can set ourselves up for some long-term successes. So I offer that to you so that you understand what the priorities are, that I will continue to work on this. I'm not turfing it to Mark Brown because he's got plenty to do. I will do this, but by me taking this on, it'll move slowly, but it will move. And so I can promise you that we'll work together to move that along. As far as the powder farm, I understand that we'll be meeting with Justin Farmer, our legislator, our Legislative Council representative, here on Wednesday, right? And that's the Government Affairs Committee. From what I understand, Justin's one of his primary interests is this powder farm is conservation matters, environmental matters in general. And so it's an opportunity for us to express our concern. Frankly, there's a lot we can do to raise our voice. The bottom line is going to really depend on who ends up gaining control of that property. If Olin decides to gift it to the town, which I'm not sure it wants because it doesn't want the cleanup, then we could see that sit like that for a long, long time. Frankly, off the record, if we had the kind of balance, we're being videotaped? Okay, so it's on the record. If we had the kind of balance sheet that could withstand it, I'd love to take that property. I'd go to Ola and say, donate it to us for $1. Let's raise the money somewhere, according to Dale Crew, between $3 and $10 million to clean it up, and let us maybe then either control it or gift it back to the town so that we can have a substantial break on our $2.5 million a year that we pay in property tax. So there are options here that we need to consider beyond sort of what might be in front of us. And so, again, I want to work in partnership with the Conservation Committee so that we can identify what those options are and how we might navigate the landscape to make it work.
Regarding solar, do you have any objection, Michael, if the Conservation Committee sources outside consultants without any commitment at all?
Look, you are independently minded people. If you want to do that, go ahead. I'm not going to stop you. However, please don't bring that with the expectation that I will be able to have anyone jump on it or fund anything if we don't do it in partnership, right? I can respond to a report. I can respond to outside, objective analysis if that's what you want to do. But it's not, unless we do it in concert and consider all of our resources that we have here, I can't promise you I'll be able to do anything about it.
Simply to provide you with an extension, since you're so busy with so much else, let the committee do a little research for you and present it to you.
Sure, but I would like to maybe have conversations on the front end so I understand what you're getting into, and maybe like Irwin's initiative about the residency agreements, I may know some things that could help shape the path that you decide to take. Dr. Ray? Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Fisher has the mic behind you.
Yeah, I was just going to say that if you're interested in conserving energy, one of the things that I noticed was I have no car. I had to go to the hospital for a visit with a physician at the hospital, and they were kind enough to give me a ride to the hospital, but that was a bus. Maybe if you have an SUV, when you're only transporting one person, it might be cheaper to do it in an individual car or an SUV instead of a bus.
On the solar, I know it's a reflex to go back to the old company, but they were making decisions 5 years ago based on technology that developed 10 years ago. And the technology is moving very quickly. I think you ought to think about going to an entirely new company that would use the old data that is plugged into the latest technology.
That's an interesting perspective. My thinking was, let's have the data refreshed, right? And then we can go beyond Colliers. We don't have to stick with them, but at least they would come back and work. And they also have a relationship with United Illuminating, which means that the study is covered, right, by the funds that the utilities generate to do these kinds of initiatives. So there's that consideration too. They're going to get paid for their time. It's just a matter of who's going to pay them. But I like that idea, and so we won't stick to just Colliers. We'll include other organizations.
Great.
The New Haven Jewish Community Center in Woodbridge put a roof over their parking lot, and they've gone solar and have all the panels sitting up on top of that particular thing over the parking lot, taking care of their entire building. So if you haven't seen it, it's worthwhile to see.
Okay, yeah. I like that too because it also helps us with snow. Snow removal, right? So that should be factored as part of the cost. If we could eliminate some of the snow removal costs, right? We can.
So President Mike, if you go down to IKEA, say you have two of those sinks on top of the roof, which are all done solar. But you have to go to, say, IKEA parking lot.
Okay.
So that's
Yeah.
something then you could take a look.
These are all possibilities, so let's work on it together.
Thank you, Mike, for being so transparent about new initiatives. We, the residents, really appreciate knowing what is happening. So unless there are any further questions, this meeting will close. Anyone, any questions? Going one, going twice, going three times, the meeting is adjourned.